You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome to Filmmaking Conversations with Damien Swaby. Listen to conversations with award-winning filmmakers, directors from the golden age of television, and creatives from the indie film community who continue to inspire the next generation of filmmakers. And now, over to your host, Damien Swaby.
Today on Filmmaking Conversations, I am so happy to welcome back Jessica Ray, a video producer and editor at the Lincoln Center for Performing Arts. In this conversation, we dive deep into the world of digital media production, exploring the landscape of dance equity, and discuss the unique fusion of dance film. Jessica takes us behind the scenes of Lincoln Center's vibrant programming, offering insights into live streaming, capturing the magic of dance on camera, and creating a more inclusive arts environment. Whether you're a creative professional, a dance enthusiast, or simply curious about the inner workings of New York's most iconic cultural institution, this episode is packed with valuable takeaways, so sit back and enjoy the show.
Hello, Damien. I'm doing really well.
Good.
I'm in the midst of it, in the thick of it, as some folks would say.
Yes.
Just production work, and a little bit of my own creative kind of finding, and also, working with some local org. So, I'm in it, but I'm feeling great. How are you?
Good to know. I'm feeling like a tired old guy who works in video. That's how I'm feeling. So that's the truth of it. That's very, very much the truth of it on my side. But I'm glad to hear you're doing so many productive different things. Can you tell us about the production you're working on?
Yeah, I can tell you a few things. So, as you know, I work for Lincoln Center for the Performing Arts, and I work there as a video producer and editor. And I think I'm not sure if I mentioned before, but sometimes I jump in and do live stream tech. Uh, and so I actually am going to be doing some live stream tech this weekend and just making sure that we're on the streaming waves. For our upcoming program. But it's been great. And this past week I was on the team doing some B-roll capture,
Nice.
producing that. So let's see what happened this week. Because again, we're in an organization that houses several events a week, and specifically we're in our summer festival, Summer for the City, which has a lot of choose what you pay programming. So it's really great for the city, a lot of free events. But yesterday we were on site capturing some free dance classes, some free experimental music performances, and there's a lot going on. It's wrapping up in a couple of weeks, but a lot of energy happening and swirling around, but it's exciting. And I think, again, I get excited about working at Lincoln Center for the Performing Arts, specifically our organization, because the Lincoln Center as a whole houses so many of these orgs. But I think one thing that our organization does really well is it fills in the gap with programming. So we get more diversity, we get more of a range of music styles, we get more of a range of dance styles. Like yesterday, we were on site, and this dance company, Urban Bushwomen, who is just a phenomenal dance company, that does so much work in community and talking about equity in the dance world and creating a space to talk about race and how to continue to move things forward in a positive way. They were teaching dance class and giving a little history with some social dance moves for the general public, and we love to see that. I've been having a busy week, and I'm also working with a local organization, Create Art, and they curate dance film nights. at Millennium Film in Brooklyn. And I'm working on a panel with two other wonderful dancers, performers, and we are curating 3 nights of dance film for the fall. So going through some films, watching a lot of films, and I think something else that is I find to be really beautiful about working in the intersection of dance and film is that there is a boldness there. There's an eagerness there to try things, to try new things, to sometimes fail or like go too hard in one direction. And sometimes, um, subtly explore through movement, and it works really beautifully on camera. Um, and I guess I feel really, yeah, just really excited to be a part of an experimental, I guess, genre in that way. And I get to continue to see people try and explore and not necessarily be afraid of like what everybody else is going to think, or not necessarily comparing themselves to this director, this kind of storytelling. Um, just really coming into it with an open palette and open mind. So it's really cool to see. But yeah, in the midst of pretty much going through 37 films. So there's that.
Your creative life is so full. It feels like you're touching on so many amazing things, and I'm so happy for you because that, the variety, the spice of life, or whatever the saying is. It just feels like you've got a lot of creative things happening for you, and I must admit, I'm jealous hearing your, your stories, but I'm happy for you at the same time. But you said something called dance equity. What exactly does
Mm.
that mean?
Yeah, so I think equity in dance, I think we actually have quite a ways to go in the dance world. I grew up dancing, as you know, and I went to school for dance. The way that the dance world was structured when I was coming up, and also continuing to perform and continuing to audition, it was very much sort of this tunnel of you're going to train super hard, you're going to make sure that your body's equipped. Sometimes you're going to cross train, make sure that you have the ability to go from this genre to this genre, but the goal is to get into a company and then you'll be set, right? So that
Oh,
was kind of like the pipeline for me, growing up, and for a lot of people in my generation. But as we've seen the arts change, and as we've seen, funding change significantly for the arts, um, we realize, that's not sustainable. It's not necessarily sustainable to spend all your time, energy, money, focusing on this one goal of being a part of somebody else's vision for how to move your body.
yeah.
So I think there's a lot of work that's been done in that arena of just, okay, how can we make dance more equitable as a just in general, like how can more people access it financially, how can more people access the joy of dance, and incorporating a dance lifestyle, or incorporating a sense of being a dance professional in their lifestyle without dedicating all this time, energy for such a little payoff. And I think also what comes with that when I'm thinking about equity is I'm thinking about the culture of those spaces as well, because something that I've noticed, again, being in these arenas, is seeing how, so basically, the structure of the dance company is you have the choreographer, the artistic direction,
Okay.
who is somewhat considered, I guess, like God in a way. Like they're,
Mm.
giving you the vision. They're making sure that you're, I guess, fitting the vision that they're trying to execute. So maybe that means fitting it aesthetically as well. You're fitting in with the culture of what they're trying to broadcast into the world. And I guess, and this may be talking a little out of line here. I can get a little on my soapbox,
Go
but
for it.
in a way, it becomes a little cultish, in my opinion. If there's not a model that's not just, completely, like, the ship is completely run by the artistic director, and everyone is falling in line to that. So what I found in specifically seeing a company like Urban Bushwomen, there is such an emphasis on leadership and individual leadership. I think as a that comes together as a collective, right? So they're teaching you actively how to lead as a part of this collective environment, which I find is such a beautiful way to ensure, like, autonomy and ensure self-awareness, ensure that, you're constantly choosing to go this direction. Whereas I've seen other companies that are just, they, as long as you fit the part, you look the part, and you
Yeah.
can execute well, then, you'll be in for a few years. And if you fall out of line of that, then we need to bring somebody else in. And I think that is not equitable. And oftentimes in these companies as well. I'm sorry, I'm like kind of going all over the place. The
No,
equity
go for it.
question is very huge, and there's still, again, a lot of work to be done in the dance world. But I think that, yeah, oftentimes dance companies are not able to provide health insurance. They can't necessarily give you like a full, salary. So you do have to be working extra hard to just also be on this one path. So maybe picking up extra work and things like that to be so dedicated. um and obviously that's not super equitable. Like, you're working
No.
with your body all the time. You're also maybe not taking care of mentally with your mental health. And, like, we know as dancers that are embodying these different characters or these different feelings, with intensity, that can sometimes wreak havoc on you. And
Yeah.
you may need some coping mechanisms out of that. So I think there's a lot of work to be done. A lot of it has to do with a lot of arts organizations not having the funding to support the vision that they have. Sometimes the vision is so ambitious, but the funds are just not there.
Yeah.
So I think in terms of, again, incorporating an equitable practice, it's like maybe we make some adjustments, and then, maybe we make some adjustments to the vision, or we incorporate some different practices that help us collectively work together in a way that's going to be beneficial to everyone, and not just like this vision, for
Yeah.
this one person. So yeah, that was my kind of soapbox on
No,
equity.
great to learn. I mean, some things I don't understand from a European perspective. You said about the healthcare situation, but I imagine if you work full time, even if your salary is low, the company has to give you healthcare, or is that not something that happens in the arts? Or
Yeah, I think it can be a little bit tricky. I think sometimes it's a full-time situation that can't totally provide healthcare. I don't know all the rules and regulations since
oh,
I've
okay,
been working full-time in another industry. Things may have changed, because also legally here, in different states, different,
oh,
yeah,
okay,
some
yeah,
things are different, based on state laws. But yeah, I just know from experience that that does not always happen.
the
So,
art. Gosh,
yeah,
sometimes it
it's
can be
the
cruel.
arts.
Can be cruel
Truly,
sometimes.
truly.
And you
Um,
mentioned live streaming as well. That's something a lot of us as video producers and editors have to be a part of in this modern digital world we're living in. When you're live streaming, are you only concentrating on the technical aspects of the live stream, i.e., what camera you're using? Are you using OBS Studio, or are you using Microsoft Teams now that has an option for live streaming? Or are you actually thinking about the creative side of it as well, in regard to what am I seeing and how do I want to project this live stream across to America?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the way that it works in at Lincoln Center for the Performing Arts and our on our video team is that we have separate roles for
Mhm.
a live stream. So I'll be the live stream tech. There'll be somebody else that's producing the whole thing, someone else that is coming in and switching and directing. And then we
Excellent.
have, right, like maybe our 3 or 4 camera angles. So we do have that person that's directing. Sometimes there's a director and a switcher because it really is kind of nice to have both of those things. But
Oh gosh, yeah.
sometimes we're a smaller team, so we kind of condense roles. But I'd speak to the live streams that we do over the summer. They are a bigger production, so we do have a fuller team in that regard. And so I focus on live stream tech. Sometimes I do get to direct and also switch, which is really fun.
Mm.
We don't always have the luxury of seeing the show right before we're put in the hot seat to cut it. But something that I really like to rely on if I'm in a director role is really listening and thinking about the rhythm of what people are going to be experiencing at home. So listening to the music, cutting on a rhythm, thinking
Yeah.
about like how long should I hold this shot, so people get the information that they need, but then can I move to keep it interesting? So I try to keep a solid rhythm when I'm cutting and directing. And yeah, it can be a lot directing when you're directing live cameras. So I'll also speak to, and during our summer programming, we have live camera operators. During our fall programming, we work with an install system, so a PTZ system. So we have 4 cameras installed
Nice.
in one venue, and then there's another venue when we work out of where we have 12 cameras installed.
Whoa.
So that is quite a bit to choose
Yeah.
from. Um, but I'd say it's really nice to be able to, I think, work within the install system in the sense of it's quicker to
Yeah.
cut and go back and forth. But I really think there's something special working with cameramen and camera women
Yeah.
because or non-binary folks because it's so cool to see the human aspect of, oh, I got the shot, or like, let me move the camera a certain way
Yeah.
or pan
Yeah.
it. So
Yeah.
I really believe in the value of the filmmaker. So I'm into it. And it's more interesting too to talk to the person and see, like, can you grab this close up of the singer on the right? Can you oh, there you go. Great. That looks great.
Yeah.
Like there's a
Yeah.
different energy that comes with that. So I think that's really exciting. And then speaking to the technical aspect, this is something that's a little more new to me.
Yeah.
I have for sure worked with live streaming in a technical sense over the last probably 5 years of my career sporadically, but the last 2 or 3 years more pointedly with Lincoln Center. And we use Livestream Studio. We use a lot of the Black Magic
Likewise. Me too.
materials.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, my focus when I'm tech is just to make sure the signal is strong and that things are streaming. Because
Yeah.
I think one thing that, yeah, I mean, what gets to be a lot is if something goes wrong there while you're also doing other things, because you really do have to take a moment because there are so many different aspects to live streaming. Making sure you have all the URLs are right, or like all the
Yeah.
stream keys are right, making sure if there's an issue with the signal that you know how to troubleshoot it. If something just stops working because it just stops working because it's finicky piece of equipment.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of things to, or maybe there's a disrupt in the network, and you gotta switch to a different network. So I think that it is important to have those different roles when you're live streaming, because it just ensures that you're gonna have a smoother ride.
I completely agree with you. That is perfectly put. Um, that really was, because a lot of people, I don't think, understand what goes into live streaming. They just think, oh well, I can speak on Facebook Live, can't I? So why can't I just live stream an event? Or sometimes people would think, if you're a cameraman, for example, you can easily just plug a camera via your cam link. Say if you've got a mirrorless camera like a Sony A7S or a GH5, you can plug that into via a cam link and live stream. Yes, you can, but there's different capabilities in different situations that require different methodologies. So you've put it perfectly, and I hope everyone listening can live stream just as well as you do. That would definitely be a great thing. And as well as your live streaming and everything else you've said, you touched upon dance films. Now, for a lot of us, well, I shouldn't say for a lot of us, I'll say the truth. For me, I don't really, uh, I haven't really seen that many dance films. So I would be not one of the best people to judge a dance film for a film festival, for example, or for whatever it may be. What exactly do you look for in dance films that are strong and that you feel demand being placed in front of people's eyes?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. I think that, well, first off, it's definitely my hope that more folks see dance film outside of dancers in the dance community, because we really do, I think, need other forms to continue to carry on that type of work. Um, but to answer your question, I look for a lot of the things that I would look for in a film that I want to watch and sit down and be a part of. I look for the storytelling. I look at the different aspects of that. I look at the production quality. I really like to see, with movement specifically, that there's an intention behind the movement. So that could fall
Mhm.
under storytelling, but I think movement, you can judge, like, based on the performance and based on how the choreography is put together, and also how the two merge. So, was the dancer thinking about exploring different angles? Were they thinking about exploring the movement through the point of view of the camera in a different way versus being on stage flat? So I
Okay.
think there are a lot of, I think what I've seen, yeah, let me clarify. I think a lot of what I've seen, and something that I used to do and also sometimes get stuck in doing, because I also love to choreograph and I love to make work. And I think my brain functions a specific way when I'm making something. I'm
Mm.
seeing it on stage, right? Like, I'm seeing the viewer be in front of this stage of dancers, and I'm thinking of formations, and I'm thinking of creating patterns and movement. I'm thinking of the architecture of the space in that sense, right? Um, but with film, there's so much more that you can do, and there's so much more you can say with a piece of choreography when speaking directly to the camera, or at an angle underneath,
Yeah.
or at, like, maybe a drone, like, up top angle, maybe following you around. So I think sometimes that I think sometimes choreographers and dancers can get lost in the sense of, well, this is what I'm trying to say, and it looks like this, and you're only going to get it if I say it from this angle. And that's just simply not true. Like, that's one version. That's one version of the language, right? But
Yeah.
there are other ways, and there are other entry points, and I think that's something we really have to think about, is the entry point, right? This is a visual entry point for, hopefully, folks that don't go to see a lot of dance. So, like, let's show them something interesting.
Mm.
And so that's how I like to look at judging dance films. And I have to also give credit to uh, Julia DeSenza and Georgia, who are a part of Create Art and who really started this organization. And Julia has also this way of looking at and judging film that
Mhm.
we've all kind of discussed in house. And she can probably go into more specifics of what she looks for. But yeah, I think for me, I'm looking at all those things. I'm looking at choreography. I'm looking at the performance in the piece because that's important too. Like you can have an amazing performance by a dancer and maybe it's not shot in the way that I love
Right.
it to be shot, but because the dancer's performing at such a high caliber, I can't stop watching them, right?
Yeah.
So that is also key. It's like acting, right? Like something doesn't
Yeah.
have to be shot brilliantly for you to be enthralled by that
Completely.
performance. hmm so that, and then I do look at that production quality. I'm like, okay, like what lenses did we use? Like what
Mm.
camera? How is the editing? I also love to look at editing because I'm an editor as well. And I love to see when there's play in the editing, when there's creativity in the editing. Something that is really important to me, I think, is there's a sense of choreographing, and having that solid idea, but there is a way to also re-choreograph in the edit that I find to be very interesting. I find that parallel in editing and choreography. Um, because in editing you're putting a story together, right? Like you've shot the film, you maybe shot it, you got to shoot it all out of order sometimes because that's just how
Yeah.
schedules go.
Yeah.
And then you're piecing it together and you're finding, oh, this take doesn't work, or oh, maybe we cut the scene a little bit short. um and I think that that's beautiful if you can also release that as the choreographer in the editing. It's like, oh well, I really like this take and I really like the movement that they do at the end, but it doesn't totally fit right here. What if we put that at the top? And
Yeah.
then, so I think that's something I look for as well. Um, and also lighting, like if we can get some lighting or some props in there, that's cool. I look at the set. So there's a lot that I look for, but I think the main thing is, am I walking away from this piece and did it impact me in some way? And if it did, like let me sit with how it impacted me and reflect on that.
That's brilliant. So many layers, many different things you're looking for that are related to the art form, which is great. And it's the way it should be, in my opinion, the way you're looking at things. And you co-directed and choreographed a project Yield, is a multidisciplinary response to Marion Hassinger's work. How did this project come about? And can you tell us a bit about it, please?
Yeah. So Yield came about from the mind of Nicole Poole, who is the executive director of Spark Creative Lab. It's a nonprofit arts organization in Oklahoma City. And she came up with this concept, I think, just from, you know, being in the land of Oklahoma and seeing Marion Hassinger's work, uh, that was at the time at Oklahoma Contemporary, and the work was called Nature Sweet Nature, and it was sort of these pipes coming out of this base outside. They were on display outside of Oklahoma Contemporary at the time, and something about that really spoke to her about being tied to the land. And so she wanted to hear from cultural leaders across Oklahoma City, what their relationship was to the land. And so we held a basically town hall at
Mm.
Oklahoma Contemporary, inviting different cultural leaders to come and just talk about relationship to the land. A lot of folks talk about equity. A lot of folks talked about, where we are as a society now. And it was just interesting hearing from different folks. And out of that, um, there were note cards taken and put in a beautiful box and then
Yeah.
shuffled around. And Tony, I'm trying to remember his last name. let's see. Let me start that over. But basically, a poem was curated by Nicole and another member of Spark, a creative lab, uh, and that served as the spine of Yield. And yeah, I think working on that was transformative for me in the sense that
Brilliant.
I had never worked with so many different artists in that capacity. So basically the way that this multidisciplinary response, this collaboration was set up was we had a series of workshops at Oklahoma Contemporary, and those workshops focused on theater, visual art, dance. I got to lead the dance workshop, which was so much
Nice.
fun. And yeah, so we had all these different workshops, and what we did was we invited the community to come in, and the workshops were free. And they created and co-created with Spark Creative Lab. Uh, and what they co-created in those workshops, we added into our cumulative performance. So in a way, yes, I was like choreography of many things at once, and also putting together some movement for the dancers that were involved. But yeah, it was a lot. And Nicole has a lot of ideas. She is constantly thinking of how can we connect this to community, which was really great and like I think kept us grounded in the sense of how do we continue to hold on to what people have responded to in the workshop, what they've created in the workshop. And I think there was really for me a sense of I wanted people to be able to see themselves in the end product of the work. So going back, we had all these workshops. Before that, there was this town hall. This poem was created amidst like this workshop.
Brilliant.
Um, and yeah, it was so much, and it's hard to kind of I guess summarize what that project is, but I also would encourage there's a documentary that was made by
Oh.
Zachary Burns, who is also a part of Part Spark Creative Lab. And to talk a little bit more about that organization, it really is an amalgamation of so many artists. There's visual artists, there's musicians, there's classical musicians, there's a DJ, there's dancers that are part of this. So we're really talking about so many
Huge.
people coming together to work together. Like, can you imagine that many artists with so many ideas and trying to sort
Yeah.
of like curate, but also not throw away, like honor the ideas that are being brought to the table, but also saying, okay, this is what's really going to work with, you know, the direction that we're going with the piece. So that also was like a play and a balance and like a tug and but I think it really worked out to be something that Oklahoma had never really seen before in that way in terms of bringing so many art forms together. Um, and yeah, it was a piece that I'll never forget being a part of. Yeah, and I'd encourage a watch of the documentary. I'll send you a link
I
to
was
their
just about to
the
ask.
page.
Yeah. Yeah. Please do send me a link, and I'll also put that in the show notes for everyone else to watch. That would be really good. So, how do you feel that project would have taken place if you had done it in Brooklyn, which, from my limited knowledge, it has more of a creative spark and a history of performance that maybe Oklahoma doesn't?
Yeah, I think what was special about having a performance like that in Oklahoma was the newness of it, was the sort of non-expectation
Ah,
because I think there's a lot of cultural community in Oklahoma. There's like a lot of artistic cultural community, but it's still not as big as what we would experience here in New York or in Brooklyn. And there's not like a huge history of multidisciplinary projects coming together, right? So I think that was what was special about it happening in Oklahoma, and also seeing the cross cultural pollination. So there was a section in Yield that was very much call and response, and sort of like a procession happening. And then there was also just more acknowledgement of the indigenous practices, of folks in that space, and language, I think, being used as well. And not that that wouldn't happen in Brooklyn, I think it very much would, but I think it happening in Oklahoma City, just a moment for that to be acknowledged in an atmosphere that is still very conservative generally, and still very much not, I think, able to reckon with the history of those spaces. But yeah, I think if we were to do a program like this in Brooklyn, we definitely have to get more permits. But it's totally doable. I think it would be a little bit more difficult with folks' schedules, but I think a project like this is totally doable here, and it just takes working with the right organizations and bringing the right leaders on board to really attack something like this, and being dedicated to it for a period of months. Like, Yield was brought forth, I believe it was a 6 to 7 week period of time that it cultivated and accumulated. So that was a bit of time to come up with the material, to, use material from the workshops, um to bring people together for additional rehearsals. So I think that totally doable, but a higher budget for sure. and,
Yeah.
and working with schedules and permits. But yeah, and I think the impact, it may not be the same, right? Because
Mm.
again, I think in many spaces in New York, and I'm not saying this about all of New York, but there is more of a sense, I feel, being here, of folks acknowledging and knowing their history
Yeah.
versus being in a space like that in Oklahoma.
I see. And you've mentioned previously using dance as a form as communal therapy. Why exactly is that?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up, because I think that I do want to clarify. I'm not a licensed therapist. I don't know, a lot
Yeah.
of those specific methods, but something that really has resonated with me since I've been moving around my whole life, basically, is that there's this release of build up. There's this physical, sort of spiritual, mental release. I mean, we all know, like, exercise gives
Mm.
you a form of mental release, and I think I just adapt that basic knowledge into
Yeah.
dance, and I apply it to also giving me a sense of emotional release. Like, if I'm not always the best at my words, hopefully that's not coming through in this
Oh, I would
podcast.
never have, never ever thought that.
Oh,
You
but
you're great with your words.
thank you. But yeah, when I'm in a moment that has caught me off guard, or I I tend to not always know how to process and sometimes internalize, and as we all know, that can build up over time. And so I've always found dance as a way to release stress, negativity, um, any kind of built up anger or anguish, to process grief. And so I think I want to bring that experience to other folks, right? Like,
Yeah.
I will say, when I was leading the workshop, the dance workshop, during our process with Yield, um, I approached the workshop from a meditative perspective. So I kind of like to start out with everybody closing their eyes and just breathing and hearing and feeling their breath in their body. And then that breath sort of igniting, um, whether a ball of fire or energy inside your chest that sort of moves around in your body. And as it moves around in your body, you're able to feel like your tendons, your ligaments, your muscles, your
Yeah.
bones, just really trying to break it down into like material that people can access and then start to move with and start to move their bodies and kind of release some of that energy as we go through that initial warm up. And then I like to, after we've done the warm up, just move around and like move through space, walk through space, run around through space, kind of let our inhibitions go a little bit. Maybe we yell, maybe we like laugh, just to kind of get things moving. And then we kind of come back down and we ground and we start to get into the physical movement or like more of a warm up to get our bodies ready to move into the choreography for the workshop. But yeah, I like to go that meditative route in the beginning because I just think that it's also hard for people to have time to sit with themselves, to hear their own breath, to understand what's going on in their body. And we really do desperately need that time as humans to check in with ourselves physically and mentally and emotionally. And that is something that I really, really want to continue to, I don't want to say preach, but preach. I want to continue to move forward with that in my, yeah, in my front. I was going to say front view mirror, but that is something that I want to continue with moving forward.
And you're
I
right.
just, I need that.
You're right. People really do need to check in on themselves in those ways. It's fundamental, in my opinion, that people do that. They should do that. And with all of your creative work that's going on right now, you've got so much going on as well as working at the Lincoln Center. Balancing a creative passion with professional responsibilities can be very challenging. I think we all know this. How do you manage to do this? And what are your coping mechanisms outside of dance?
Yeah, that's a great question because that's a question I think we have to constantly ask ourselves as creative professionals. There is so much creative energy that you're giving to your professional life, specifically if you're working for an organization or full time. And how do you rebuild that to be present with your other creative ideas? And I think for me, I found that visual art is a way for me to release and maybe stop thinking and
Yeah.
kind of just put colors and
Okay.
texture on a page, which and sometimes even sketching out expressions. Again, this is probably another form of emotional mental release for me, but
Yeah.
I found that being able to just get somewhere and be quiet and color, like,
Yeah.
even though it's so simple, is
Yeah.
um is a great way for me to balance if I'm not able to dance. And then too, just watching movies. I love movies. I love
Nice.
watching TV. I love learning in that way. I love storytelling, reading. And also going to shows, going to dance shows. I
Nice.
love going to performances. If I'm able to, I'll just kind of kick back and absorb. I think
Okay.
that's something that, yeah, continues to fuel my creativity outside of work and outside of my own creative ambitions, is just absorbing what the world, can give us and what these beautiful people in the world can give
Mm.
us. And also love, getting out in nature, doing a hike,
Oh,
um,
okay.
going to the beach. I love
Okay.
that stuff. So I think touching grass is very important and I encourage it
Yeah.
for all.
That's it's without, well, I'm talking about my own documentary. I'm in production for the moment. It's called Greens I can't even speak, green spaces, the wild heart of Enfield. In the borough I live in, there's loads and loads of parks and green spaces, and how I feel that they're fundamental to us, because living in London, there's the hustle and bustle everywhere, and there's a lot of noise at times and things like that. And it's beautiful to just have so many green spaces we can sit, reflect, and enjoy, especially on a sunny day. I really enjoy those spaces, and I can see how they help people. Some people you'll see they'll have a small easel, and you might see someone
Yes.
painting or something like that, similar to what you mentioned about expressions, with pen to paper and things in that way. So this time next year, where will Jessica Ray be? What will Jessica Ray be doing? Who is Jessica Ray this time next year?
Ah! That is something that I constantly think about, actually. I feel that I do always have one foot in the future time continuum, and I'm trying to figure out where she's going to be. But I'd love to be in a place where I'm continuing to make work. Like, I want to continue to make dances. I want to continue to make dance films. I think I've talked before about feeling like I'm just, hitting the ground running. Even though I've been doing this for a while, it still
Mm,
feels imaginative. It still feels like there's so much to explore. It still
yeah,
feels like there's this tangible ecstasy of creativity that's just abundant there. So I want to continue to create and make with my friends. And I mean, hopefully, I'm putting out another film. I'm putting out another dance film, and I'm in
congrats.
process. Thank you. And I'm in process of creating a live show. So I hope to be doing those things. And then I honestly still hope to be working at Lincoln Center and seeing what is going to come of the institution. And I think they're on a really nice path right now. And I hope to see more collaboration, I think, between the other organizations on campus. And Lincoln Center for the Performing Arts, because I really feel like our programming, as that institution that holds space for all those other institutions, is leading the way. And I want more of the institutions on campus to embrace art making now.